Hi everybody, I'm Alex, and in this video I'm going to show you how to paint a portrait in an indirect painting style. We're going to go from a drawing to a grisaille at first, after that we will glaze on top, and finally, and this is the best part, we're going to refine and finish the painting. Now before we start, this painting took me around 14 hours and everything will be available on my Patreon that I have launched just today. So a lot more content on it is going to come soon. So check that out. Alright, let's start. Alright, so after making a good drawing, I'm going to start with the grisaille. You can actually see right now I'm using the Velasquez medium and I'm going to apply it to my titanium white. Basically, it's going to replicate the effects of lead white. It's going to be a lot more thicker and the tinting strength is going to be lower. And I'm also going to add a little bit of stained oil to my Van Dyke brown. If we don't do that, our painting is going to sink in on the next layer. And so I want to avoid that because if an oil painting sinks in, we have to oil out, and the more we oil out, the more yellow our painting is going to be over time. And right now, I'm just focusing on values. We're trying to create a grisaille in basically 1 or 2 sessions maximum. And so right now, I'm adding a little bit of, the shadows and the dark areas of the painting. I always start by putting the darker areas first. The reason why I do that is because we always compare colors to one another. So if we start by putting the light areas first, what is going to happen is that when we're going to place the dark areas, basically we're going to notice that the light areas and the halftones are just way too bright. And that's because we haven't placed those dark areas. And so our brain has nothing to compare the light areas to. Whereas if we start by putting dark areas and let's say a little bit of the light areas, well, we just have a lot more, let's say, colors to compare to. And so I think it's probably the best way to start a painting. I'm not going to finish the painting here. I'm not trying to get a perfect result right now. And that is actually one of the greatest things that we have with working in layers. I have worked in alla prima for a very long time, but with layers, you have a lot of freedom and you can basically make a lot of mistakes and correct them with time. So this is the first day and I'm going to try to complete most of the painting. You're going to see that I don't have the time because the size of the panel is pretty big. I'm working on an ACM panel, and so I'm going to explain what colors I'm going to use for glazing and all of that later. For now, let's focus on the grisaille. Basically, one of the things that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep my values a little bit lighter, especially the shadows. When we're going to glaze on top, it's going to create a very luminous effect. And so glazing is a very, very strange word because, every artist has his own definition of glazing. So it's really hard to find, a great definition of what glazing is, but we're going to talk about that later. For the grisaille, basically, I tried to look at the shadows and the lights and I tried to place the values as accurately as possible. And so I always compare the values that I see. Every time that I place, a color, a value, I try to compare that value or that color to the surrounding. Again, I start by putting the dark elements of the eye, and there is a reason for that. I just want to see how dark that eye can go. But like I've said, I try to keep the values a little bit lighter. And so it can be a little bit strange for some people to, keep the values a little bit lighter. You may think that you start the painting by creating fake values or inaccurate values, but I promise it's really worth it because it's going to pay off at the end when we will start to glaze. You can actually see that on my palette I have a lot of paint, and that's because we're making a Rembrandt master copy. Rembrandt used to paint very, very thickly, especially in the lights and the halftones, not the shadows. The shadows are quite thick, but not as thick as the lights and the halftones. And I'm just using a rosemary flat brush. I think it's a Mastery Choice brush. I really like those brushes. It's natural brushes, so I really, really like them. And sometimes I'm going to use the round brushes from Michael Klein, again from Rosemary & Co. Those are really, really nice for applying very thick and impasto brush strokes. It's a really nice brush. Right now I'm using it. You can actually see that how thick and impasto those brush strokes are. So I really, really like it. And basically I try to really have that impasto look in my lights and halftones while keeping my shadows a little bit thin, even though I'm using Van Dyke brown, which is a pretty opaque color, let's say, because I'm using the one from Old Holland, which is pretty opaque. So if we look at the painting right now, it is at a stage where it looks okay, but you're going to see later on the second, on the third day, that actually the stage that we are right now is not such a great stage. It's okay because, well, we just started, but we're going to fix a lot of the drawing later. So I started with the glazing. I'm using the titanium white. After that, I use the transparent yellow iron oxide. Then I use alizarin crimson, transparent red iron oxide, and indifferent blue. You can actually see that I have premixed two dark colors, and that is just transparent red iron oxide and indifferent blue. I create one mixture that is more towards the brown, so it's warmer, and I have another mixture that is more towards dark, that is cooler. That's just to to have variety in my shadows if I want to. Now, before I continue, I have to say a few words about our palette. Most of the colors that I'm using here are really good and very permanent, but one color has pretty big issues if you mix it with white, and that is alizarin crimson. So you have to be pretty careful. Now, if you really care about making your paintings as archival as possible, another color that I can recommend is quinacridone magenta. I have the one from Gamblin, it's PR122. It's a very permanent color. So if you really care about that, you can use this instead of the alizarin crimson. And so I've just received it, I'm going to use it and test it in my future paintings. Alright, let's get back. For the face, for the portrait, I'm just going to apply a little bit of transparent yellow iron oxide and alizarin crimson. Now, another thing that I need to say is that I'm not using any medium here. Even when I'm glazing, I don't use any medium. The only moment when I'm going to add a little bit of medium, I add a little bit of linseed oil, is when I oil out the painting. That's it. I don't use any medium. And the reason why we can in a way work like here without a medium is because we have transparent pigments. And so you can actually see right now, all I'm doing, especially for the portrait, is I apply those transparent pigments and then I wipe them with a tissue. It looks a little bit strange because the whole portrait is in grayscale. Our colors look a little bit strange, but you will see that with time it's going to take shape. So you have to just be confident in this stage. Now, just like with any portrait, I try to keep, that idea that the cheeks are a little bit more reddish and, that area around the beard is going to be a little bit more greenish, bluish, cooler. So I try to follow that idea. And so, again, this is a very early stage and you're going to see that we have a lot of, inaccurate drawing here. But again, that is a great thing about working in layers. We have a lot of freedom and, we have a lot of time to change our mind. We can look at a painting a few days later and change whatever we want to. Whereas if you paint an alla prima, you have to, you always have that pressure with alla prima to finish a painting in just one day, which can be a little bit overwhelming, even though alla prima is probably the best way to get better at oil painting. Now, you can actually see that I have completed the whole painting with just, those glazes, and it actually took me around, I will say, 2-3 hours to complete most of the painting. The glazing stage, especially when you just start to glaze, actually doesn't take that much time. And so right now I started to mix those glazes with the titanium white that I have again with the Velasquez medium. Okay, so right now it is the third day, I think, and so it's a new session. You can actually see that some of the painting has sink in, which is a normal thing, and so I have oiled out a little bit of the painting. I only oil out the areas that I'm going to work in and the dark areas around, just for context, because if I don't oil out the darker areas around, I'm just going to misjudge the colors that I see, so I have to oil out them. And here I'm doing something a little bit different. I wanted to correct the drawing because I felt that the eyes, the proportions weren't as good, so I wanted to use a more opaque palette. And so right now I'm using the titanium white again with the Velasquez medium, yellow brown, which is a more chromatic version of yellow ochre. Then we have naphthol red, which is kind of like cadmium red but less strong. Then we have again the transparent red iron oxide and indifferent blue. That's because I still want to get those transparent pigments for my shadows and keep my lights more thick. That's actually a pretty famous rule, you may have heard it, to keep your shadows more thin and your lights more thick. That's what I'm trying to do here. And so I'm basically trying to correct the drawing here, and I'm trying to apply more opaque pigments. The reason why I do that is because first I wanted to to correct the drawing, and second, I need to detail some places. And so glazing is really good if you want to create that very, luminous effect, because it's going to create a lot of variety of colors, which is really nice if you try to paint a portrait. But it's not that great if you try to correct a drawing, because it's very transparent. So at least the colors that I'm using. And so right now I'm applying more of those, very opaque colors. And so I try to detail some of those areas, which works really well because the colors are really opaque. And so you can actually see that I have created, that very strange luminosity you can see around the cheeks, around the eyes, by applying those very thick brush strokes in grayscale in the Grisaille. And then when we glaze on top, it creates that very interesting luminous effect that you can only in a way get by glazing. And so again, I'm detailing that Rembrandt master copy. It's a masterpiece. His painting is extremely detailed, and you can actually see that he used a lot of small brushes. He wasn't one of those guys that used, large brushes. No, he used a lot of small brushes, but he didn't detail too much that it looks like a photorealistic painting. He kept it really subtle, and so that's why he's a genius. That's why people admire him. I never recommend to people to use large brushes because, there's a lot of limitation when it comes to that, and you end up painting like everyone else. So I don't think that's a good idea. I think you can experiment as much as you can with your tools. Try to find a unique way to paint and stick to it. It's just a lot better. And so we have to be, very careful when we try to make a master copy of this painting, because, the bar is so high. We have to be prepared, and we have to go really slow and have to think again about what we're going to do. And so right now you can actually see that we're coming close to the final result. I have all out the whole painting. You can actually see that my darks again are alive, and you can again see the true colors of those darks, because right now they look a lot better than before. The reason why I do that is because we're coming close to the final result. So I want to see the whole painting. And so again, I'm correcting the right eye this time, and you can actually see that this painting took me around, it took me around 5-6 days. So it's a long process. It's not a quick a la prima. It's not your usual a la prima quick painting, It's more of the process that you're going to use when you try to really make a serious painting. And so we're coming close to the result of the Rembrandt. It's not just as Rembrandt, but it wasn't really the goal. The goal is to learn as much as you can from those, those master copies. And Rembrandt is just, in a way, an artist that you can use to learn from and to implement in your own work. And so that's what I tried to do here. That's the final result. I hope that you guys learned something. And so thanks for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. My Patreon is in the description if you want to see the real-time process. And I'll see you soon. Bye bye.